Hello everyone, good to see you back today. We will talk about what if South Africa and the United Kingdom merge into one country. Before we move forward, we would appreciate it if you hit that like and subscribe button. Imagine this, you're living your life, minding your own business, and one day you wake up to a government announcement. Your country, the United Kingdom, has just entered into a cultural exchange program with South Africa. It was like two nations swiped right on a global dating app and decided to move in together. One is posh, loves queuing and thinks spicy means black pepper. The other runs on sunshine and considers a ghost pepper mild. The world watched as this geopolitical odd couple started unpacking their bags. Suddenly, the stiff upper lip of Britain was tested by South Africa's open-hearted chaos. It was like a library sharing space with a never-ending music festival. The result? A beautiful, confusing, and hilarious mess. It was going to be a bumpy but very entertaining ride. When Britain and South Africa merged, English was tossed into a blender with a dictionary and a bunch of spices. The Queen's English collided with South African slang, turning every conversation into a minefield of misunderstanding. Brits asked, "Could you possibly pass the chutney?" South Africans replied, "Yeah, no, for sure my boy, now." The new dialect was a beautiful disaster. Cheers meant lekker, and robot meant traffic light. Soon, a hybrid language formed. Safflish, confusing, inefficient, and perfectly charming. It was the sound of two worlds colliding, one grammatically perfect sentence at a time. If you thought the language barrier was a challenge, you should have seen what happened in the kitchen. The culinary fusion of Great Britain and South Africa was less of a delicate blend and more of a food fight. On one side, you had the UK, a nation built on fish and chips, Sunday roasts, and sandwiches. On the other side, you had South Africa, where flavor is king, meat is a food group, and spicy is a love language. The first joint state dinner was a diplomatic incident, with guests unsure if they should be eating the pap with a fork or their hands. The supermarkets became battlegrounds of taste. Aisles once neatly divided into biscuits and crisps were now chaotic melanges of Marmite and Mrs. H.S. Ball's chutney. Shoppers would find biltong hanging next to the pork pies, and Keck sisters nestled amongst the Victoria sponges. The national dish became a source of fierce debate. Was it to be the quintessentially British fish and chips, or the sacred South African braai? A compromise was eventually reached: fish and chips, but the fish had to be snoek and it had to be cooked over an open flame. It was a strange, smoky, and surprisingly delicious creation that pleased absolutely no one at first, but everyone eventually grew to love. The culinary experiments that emerged were nothing short of legendary. Chefs started creating bizarre but brilliant fusion dishes. Think Boerewors rolls, served in a Yorkshire pudding, Malva pudding with a side of Eton mess, and of course, the infamous biltong and crumpet sandwich, a chewy, salty, and slightly doughy snack that became the symbol of the new nation's awkward but endearing partnership. Tea time was revolutionized. Instead of delicate cucumber sandwiches, you'd be served braai, which are basically grilled cheese sandwiches on steroids, oozing with cheese, tomato, and onion. The British initially protested this hostile takeover of their most sacred ritual, but it was hard to argue with a perfectly toasted cheesy masterpiece. The biggest cultural shift, however, was the introduction of the braai to British life. At first, the Brits were skeptical. Cooking outdoors, in this weather? But the South Africans were persistent. They taught their new compatriots that a braai isn't just about cooking, it's a social event, a way of life. Soon, the sight of people huddled under umbrellas in the pouring rain, patiently turning sausages over a smoky fire, became a common weekend scene across the UK. They learned that it's not a barbecue, it's a braai, a distinction that was explained with the patience of a saint to every confused Brit who dared to use the wrong word. The food of Suffolk was a wild ride, a journey of flavor that was often weird, sometimes wonderful, and always unforgettable. When the UK and South Africa merged, the weather was a shock. Brits, always ready for drizzle, treat a sunny day like a miracle. South Africans, used to endless sun, celebrate rain as a blessing. Suddenly, you could have English mist in the morning, African sun at noon, and a surprise downpour by dinner. People wore winter coats and shorts together, and guessing the weather became a national joke. In this new climate, everyone had to adapt, sometimes hilariously. Navigating the new United Kingdom of South Africa was like walking through a maze blindfolded. The rules of engagement were rewritten overnight. The British mastered the awkward nod or handshake, while South Africans hugged, back-patted, and performed elaborate handshakes. Early integration meant clumsy encounters, handshakes colliding with bear hugs. Time was another challenge. Brits arrived early. South Africans, governed by now and just now, strolled in late, wine in hand. Complaints? Brits did it quietly, South Africans loudly, with colorful Afrikaans for emphasis. Eventually a hybrid emerged, the braai queue, sort of orderly, mostly fun, and always full of laughter. The UK and South Africa are obsessed with rugby and cricket, fierce rivals, passionate fans, and a history of drama. But what if they had to join forces as one team? Chaos, confused fans, clashing anthems, and a team with no identity. The stands were a wild sea of green, gold, and white. English structure met South African power. At first a disaster, but soon they learned from each other, blending passion and precision. Fans united, rivalry turned outward, and together they became unstoppable. You can't talk about the UK and South Africa without talking about history. And let's be honest, it's a complicated one. It's kinda like that one family member you have this really long, awkward past with, but you still have to see them at Christmas. The relationship started with the British Empire setting up a colony at the Cape, which set off a chain of events, wars, diamonds, and, yeah, a whole lot of tension. For a long time, the relationship was all about power, with Britain as the dominant force and South Africa as the colony. It's a history that left some pretty deep scars, and a legacy that both countries are honestly still grappling with today. This new national merger, though, forced them to confront that history head-on. It wasn't just something you could read about in books anymore, it was sitting right across from you at the dinner table, asking you to pass the salt. The British had to face the uncomfortable truths of their colonial past, the exploitation, the arrogance that came with it. The South Africans had to navigate these complex feelings of resentment, connection, and, well, the undeniable influence that British culture left on their own. It was like the world's most intense therapy session, but for two entire countries. Museums had to be redesigned, history books rewritten, and a lot of very difficult conversations had to happen. But, you know, this shared, painful history also provided a weird kind of connection. After the end of apartheid, the relationship began to change. South Africa rejoined the Commonwealth, and the two nations started to build a new partnership, one based more on equality and mutual respect. This recent history became the foundation for the merger. It was a sign that they could move past the old dynamics and create something new. People like Nelson Mandela, who was respected and admired in both countries, became symbols of this new potential. His message of reconciliation and forgiveness became the unofficial motto of the new nation, a reminder that even the deepest wounds can heal. This merger became a chance to finally close that chapter and start a new one. It was an opportunity to acknowledge the past, learn from it, and then build a future that wasn't defined by it. The new generation born into this combined country didn't have the same baggage. For them, the history was just that, history. They saw themselves not as British or South African, but as citizens of this strange, new, and wonderful place. The great historical handshake wasn't about forgetting what happened. It was about agreeing to move forward together, as awkward, dysfunctional, but ultimately hopeful flatmates. Life in the new Suffolk was a daily adventure in cultural misunderstanding. Even simple tasks became comedic chaos, like driving. Both countries drive on the left, but the British are polite and cautious, while South Africans are, well, more assertive. The roads became a battlefield of politeness versus pure pragmatism. Public holidays, a mess. The UK had quiet bank holidays. South Africa had braais. Soon, there were 40 holidays a year. At work, British managers were baffled by blunt South African feedback. And social invites. Brits expected a quick snack but found themselves at all-night braais. These daily disasters were just the hilarious growing pains of a new nation. So, what would it actually be like to live in this bonkers new country? Well, it would be like living in a constant state of beautiful, organized chaos. It would be frustrating one minute and honestly, utterly delightful the next. You'd wake up to the sound of rain on the roof, but the air would smell like last night's braai. Your morning news would feature a serious debate in parliament, followed by a feel-good story about a surfer who befriended a penguin. It would be a nation that takes its tea very seriously, but also believes that any problem can be solved by lighting a fire and cooking some meat. It would be a place of endless contradictions. The national character would be this fascinating hybrid. It would have the British resilience, the ability to keep calm and carry on through any crisis, but combined with the South African optimism, the unwavering belief that everything will be all right in the end. People would be polite and orderly in queues, but the queues would be for a Boer Wars roll stand. They'd be fiercely passionate about their sports teams, but they'd apologize to the opposition after winning. It would be a nation of stoic optimists, of polite party animals, of people who could discuss the weather for an hour and then spontaneously break into song and dance. This new country, this Suffolk, wouldn't be perfect. It would be loud and messy, and yeah, a little bit confusing. The government would be a perpetual tug-of-war between meticulous planning and last-minute improvisation. The language would be a beautiful disaster. The food, a cardiologist's nightmare. But it would also be a place with a massive heart, a place where you're greeted with the warmth of the African sun, even on a drizzly Tuesday in Manchester, a place where differences aren't just tolerated, they're celebrated, laughed at and thrown together to see what new wonderful thing might be created. In the end, living in this UK-South Africa mashup would feel like being part of the world's most interesting, dysfunctional and loving family. You'd bicker, you'd misunderstand each other, and yeah, you'd drive each other crazy. But at the end of the day you'd gather around the fire, under a gray or a sunny sky, share a biltong crumpet, and you'd know you were home. It would be a testament to the idea that two completely different worlds can come together and create something not just new, but something better. Something a whole lot more fun. And isn't that, as they'd say in Saflish, absolutely lekker, mate? Lastly, leave us your thoughts in the comments and tell us what you'd like to see next.